Right. Oh, wow, very quiet. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Yeah, this is great. This is a really great turnout. This is the first time we're doing an event like this, hosted by startups and FDs. So thank you guys for coming tonight, which I'm sure is going to be a great discussion around fundraising and financing strategies. So my name is Brennan, Managing Director at Ralston Finance Partners. So I'll be moderating tonight. We have a really good panel, so hopefully I won't have to do too much. Looking forward to that. So I wanted to start off just filling out the room and kind of to help the panelists and help just everyone get on the same page. How many people here have finance roles at their organization? Okay. And then how many people here are either founders or want to be founders or kind of in a C-level position where you're involved in fundraising? Okay. And then how many people, their companies are either fundraising currently or they're considering fundraising? Okay. So I'm in the right room, so that's good. That was mostly for me. No, that is great because the goal for this discussion is to really learn from the experiences of these four people up here. I think a lot of times when you're raising money, that you only do it so many times, so a lot of times it's the first time, or it's a different situation every time you do it. So we're going to learn about the mistakes that are common, and we'll learn about different strategies that these guys have seen work successfully. So as far as how this is going to work, I have a list of questions I'm going to throw out there, probably direct to one of our panelists, and then hope to hear from all of you guys on the same topic. If you guys have any questions during, like a point of clarification, just raise your hand. We'll acknowledge it and make sure that we get to that question before we move on to another subject. If you have any questions with kind of more substance to it, we're going to have 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. So hold those to the end and we'll open the discussion to that. All right. So now to introduce the panelists, which again, thank you guys very much for coming tonight. Start to my left, Prakash Shah. So Prakash is CFO at Pivigo and Trafi. So led fundraising at multiple companies, closing around right now, or just completed a close. Yep. And just completed a Series B at Trafi last year. Yep. They have James Downing. So James is he works with Silicon Valley Bank. Where he leads VC relations, working on debt financing, acquisition financing, working capital, those types of deals. Cool. Then we have Joe. Joe is CEO and co-founder of Reducr, a fintech based in London here. Prior to that, he held several senior finance positions with Carwow and also with Gusto, where he helped them raise over $100 million. And then on the end, we have Thea Fisher. So Thea leads international expansion for a fintech company called LittlePay. And prior to that, she worked for VC and Accelerator True, which is based here in London. So thank you guys again for being here. I really appreciate it. So I thought it would be good to start off the discussion at really the beginning. And with whether you're a first-time founder or you're a company that's later stage and you're deciding if you should be fundraising, how do you come up with that idea? How do you make the decision that I need to go and raise some money other than I don't have money? So what would be your advice to people that are considering going into fundraising? What are some of the things that they should be aware of before they get into it? And I thought, Joe, it would be good to start with you. I don't want to push you on the spot.
Thank you.
Because I know you're going through that process right now with the Reducr.
So yeah, a bit of background. So I'm currently raising a sort of pre-seed round, so about 300k. I'm hoping to get to term sheets over the next week or two with a couple of people. So I guess from my perspective, it's making sure that you know what your objectives are and that they're aligned with the people you're fundraising for. So for want to build as big a business as possible. It's not a lifestyle business. It's not like, we don't want to get to like 1 million, we want to get to like hundreds of millions. So we need to find an investor or a set of investors that have the same ambitions and same sort of, they want the same sort of returns, but they also have the same risk profile as we as a business have. So the way we did that is we sat down with people I know and just wrote a list of every single person in London and Europe who we thought have the same ambitions, fit our sort of criteria and would invest at our level, and then just went around and said like, which connections, who in our business, I mean there's only 2 of us, has connections at these places, and who do we know who has connections who can introduce us to those people, and just worked on, right, start getting introductions, start getting connections, start getting meetings, and that's how we started the process.
Yeah, I can answer that if you want. So I'm more used to working with companies that are raising sort of Series A plus from institutional VCs and other types of investor. But I think the same things apply exactly what Joe just said. I think what you need to be looking out for is trying to focus. It takes a long time to raise money. I mean, it's you're trying to run a business at the same time, but it's hugely time consuming. I mean, I've seen equity rounds that go on for months and months, and then they half complete because one of the investors hasn't quite got themselves in line, and it takes even more time to fill that out. So just trying to concentrate on making sure that you're spending time talking to the investors who will actually have an appetite to invest in the kind of business at the same stage as you are trying to raise money for. And that's I think I see it happen a lot where people don't do that. They go scattergun out. Obviously really interesting. Thank you. So they go scattergun to as many investors as they possibly can. They'll be raising a kind of 300k seed round, and they'll send it out to Axel and Summit and Vitruvian and people like that, and it's who are not invested in that stage. So just keeping it focused.
And I guess finding out whether they'll invest in that stage is usually on their website. It usually will say
it's not hard to find.
What stage they invest at, and you can just go through Crunchbase and see like, well, what are their previous investments, how big are they, and what sort of firms did they invest in? Are they in my industry, or are they just, I don't want to use like AI or deep tech or something like blockchain? Like, do they fit the sort of thing that I'm trying to do?
Do you do a lot of any cold outreach with that, or you say that you would only stick to when you can find somebody in your network?
Oh yeah, cold outreach as well, of course. Like if you can't find someone to introduce you to someone, it's LinkedIn or email or via the website, or find out where that person's talking or where they're going to an event, and just make sure you're there.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I mean, these people want to be found. It's their job to see what's going on. Even if they're not genuinely likely to invest in you, they need to see that. They want to know what's happening in the industry. So definitely the cold outreach, and most of them have their emails on their LinkedIn and on their website. So they're definitely trying to make that happen.
I can just agree with everyone else. I mean, I think that the first thing to think about is when you're raising money is, I think Joe said it is, who do you want as your investor, and who will be your investor kind of for the duration that you're looking at for that amount of money. So if it's a seed round, what are you doing with the seed round? You're really doing some sort of proof of concept, right? So there are certain investors who will only stick around for the seed. Then you'll go for Series A, then you have Series A extension, Series B. Does the investor that you have that appetite to invest the amount of money that you need to grow to the scale that you want to be at? Now, as Joe said, if you're looking to do a lifestyle business, then get a seed investor and just trundle along. Yeah. If you want to grow like rocket fuel kind of growth, then you're going to need to get some serious VC interest at some point. And then the way you approach it is going to be different depending on that scale and the size that you want to be as a business.
Thanks. Another question I had was around the process, and I guess Chris, this would be a good question for you. So when you went through the Series B, how did you decide how much money you need to raise, and what were the plans like, and how many people needed to be involved in that, and what was that process like?
Well, we actually kept it very, very tight within the key management people at the top. So basically, the way to think about it, when you're raising serious money, is to think about, well, what's the time horizon I want that money to last? What's the number of people? Because I mean, people is pretty much the major cost that any business is going to have. There's three things. There's going to be the tech, there's going to be the marketing, there's going to be the people. And of those, really the people are the key. How many people do I need to build what I need to build to show either profitability or to show scale or to show proof of concept, whatever it is that you need. And then when you start to build out this model and you build out the financials and you look at the forecasts, you know, you're trying to put all that together with everyone in the team. And I do believe very for sure in this process that too many cooks do end up spoiling the broth here. So you want to keep this very, very tight within like maybe the CEO, CFO, CTO kind of level, you know, the C-suite level, maybe a little bit of input from other people, but I think from the process perspective, you know, first of all, you know, get good lawyers for sure. Get lawyers you trust. Get lawyers that are actually going to stand up for you and actually push back against the investors. When you build the model and when you look out and say, I'm going to grow for 2 years, you know, you're looking at this funding for 2 years or 3 years or whatever that duration is. You know, when you build out, leave some of the growth outside of that range because you need to keep the investors hungry. Yeah, don't give them the hockey stick straight away. Yeah, and so when we're building this process out, we're trying to just, you know, we're showing them growth, and then you're sort of saying, well, I need this many people. What if we don't hit our targets? You know, how can we scale back and stay within that funding and still keep them? There's enough appetite out there just in case we don't make it. Now that's the sort of a plan B-ish kind of sort of scenario, and that's kind of the way I think about it. But then when we go and present, we don't show that face. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would just say I think that, you know, think about how much money you need, think about great lawyers, and think about building that forecast in to leave something on the table outside of the time horizon that you're investing.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm working with a company at the moment that's trying to work out whether they need to raise 3.5 million or 8.5, and it may seem like a fairly obvious question depending on look at your plan. But we were talking about this earlier, Joe, just before we started. We were talking about country expansion, and the 8.5 is in a scenario where they go big into the States. Okay? And so then one model will show that, another model will show this. And of course, there's pros and cons to raising 3.5 versus 8.5. I mean, you know, 8.5 is going to last you a long time. Or maybe not with US expansion, but you're going to get very diluted. So, you know, what is it valid to do? So, I mean, there's lots of schools of thought on this, and I've worked with companies who thought it's better to kind of, you know, absolutely concentrate on winning in their home market and then build a platform from which you can expand to other countries from there. You can do it, you can make your mistakes earlier on, you can make mistakes with burning through less cash, because country expansion is expensive. Hiring people in the States is super expensive. But I think there's different ways of doing it. The complexities are pretty huge. Yeah, anything?
I was going to say I don't really have an answer to like how much money you should raise. Like we at Carwell, my last business, we often set out to raise a certain amount and then raise a different amount as during the process you sort of learn about your investors' appetite, and one investor may be really interested in that US expansion, one might be completely not. And those different investors will put different money into the business depending on what they're interested in. So we had options, and we had a sort of here's how quickly we need to grow to like maintain traction and keep our valuation, and you know, here's the things we need to do on the tech side, and here's what we need to build. But how much you raise was usually fairly open.
If you go and raise too little, you're going to be back out there on the road doing the same thing far too soon. It takes your management and founding teams all their time. I mean, it's just so time consuming, and I don't think anyone really knows going into it how time consuming it's going to be. Definitely not sitting on the other side of the table do you realize how much of these people's time is spent just doing this and having these conversations, most of which are completely fruitless. So asking for too little, not at at the very early stage, 12 to 18 months runway, and then later stage, much more runway. But asking for too much, it looks like you don't know your market, you don't know your space. Maybe you're not being realistic, equally not being realistic about valuations. And when you're asking for someone to basically back you, because early stage investment is a horse or jockey, and they're trying to back a jockey, you immediately undermine their credibility in you because you're suggesting that you don't know your space and you don't know your worth and you don't know what's realistic. So that's it's important just to think about how am I pitching myself, how is this business positioning itself by asking for a really big number.
Yeah. And it will always take longer than you think. Always. And you'll always come first running out of cash.
I think so. The final thing I would add on that is just if you think about what is the money for, the money is to set you a target as to what you can achieve over what time horizon, and so you need to think very, very carefully about these guys are going to be giving you money to achieve a certain objective over a certain time frame. Now you have to think what do you need to achieve that objective over the time frame that you're looking at, and how you're going to resource it, how you're going to market it, how you're going to build the tech and whatever you need to do to actually deliver that. And that's the kind of, it's almost like a bottom-up analysis of how much you think you'll need in terms of to actually deliver what they're paying you to deliver. Is it a proof of concept? Is it a scale? And it'll be different in each case and in each scenario, but it's almost like you have to start from the bottom and say, where am I today? What am I getting paid to do? And work your way backwards to where we are now.
Yeah, and what they usually pay me to do is take risks out of the business. So each stage that you go through your fundraising, you de-risk the business more and more. So at the stage I'm at, it's like, well, does this business model work? Can you make enough money from it? Can you find a scalable marketing channel? Those are the sort of 3 risks that I need to take out between this and the next fundraising round, hopefully. So you have to think, well, what money do I need to have to prove that I can do those things and de-risk it, so when the next investor comes in, there's a lot less risk on the table for them.
And generally speaking, if you can demonstrate that you've been efficient with the capital that you've raised to date, you're much more likely to raise money again in the future because you're going to be able to show good unit economics, trending unit economics, and you're going to show that you're not just going to burn your way through a load of cash, you're going to show that you're going to use it efficiently and actually get a good return on that investor's money.
So when you're going into that process for fundraising, I think some people, I think the one area that isn't talked about a lot is the debt side of things, and people talk about it more once you get further on, and it can be just a new challenge, a new opportunity. So I'd love to hear, like, have you had companies come to you where you're like, this doesn't make sense, why are you coming here for debt? And have you guys seen where companies are going for equity raising and it makes sense for them to do a debt deal instead?
Yes to all. So lots of situations. I've got some personal views on debt, and SVB's got some views which generally align. I think I'll try and summarise a few key points. I mean, as a scale up or as an early stage company, debt used in the wrong way can be dangerous. Used in the right way can be really additive to the business. I think that we've just been talking about sort of unit economics, and that kind of translates to visibility of plan. So if you've got good unit economics, you've got some good capital efficiency, you can actually fairly well forecast what your kind of cash burn is going to look like and things like that. If you can do that with a fair degree of accuracy, then debt starts to look like something that can really work for your business. Because the thing with debt, versus equity is at some point you have to pay it back, and that's where it starts to differ from equity. And so doing it at the wrong time can put an unnecessary burden on a business. But if you use it well, then it's pretty much undilutive. It's damn sight cheaper than equity. And it can be, generally speaking, if you're with a good lender or syndicate of lenders, it can be used it can be quite scalable. So as long as you keep showing that the business is kind of growing, it's hitting its marks, hitting its milestones, then you can keep growing the debt package with it, and that can be a good complement to the equity that you're raising to the business. But it can go wrong.
Yeah, you need to be very careful about modelling out exactly how the debt's going to affect your cash flow. So in some scenarios when, if you're not going to draw down on the debt, but you're paying interest from day one and you're starting to make repayments, I'm sure this would be the case with one of your loans. But then it can end up with worse cash flows than if you just don't take the debt at all. So you have to be really careful. So when you're going to be out of money, that's when the debt is really, really hurting you. So there's several lenders out there, but you have to really make sure you've understood all the terms of the sheet, because they're quite you've given me 2 debt term sheets. I'll be honest now, first time I saw one, I had no idea what most of the terms were, and I had to ask around for them and try and work out what they were, what they all meant, and how that impacted and how I could measure my cash flow from them. And there's different debt lenders and they'll all give you slightly different terms and slightly different drawdowns and times, and you just have to make sure that you're completely aware of all of the terms that you're signing up to if you're going for it. But that said, I think people should use more debt than they do at the moment.
Yeah, and in terms of sort of timing about when you should have the conversation, this is quite simple. The worst time to have it is when you need it. That's true of pretty much all bank lending, whether it's early stage, late stage, private equity backed profitable businesses, whatever it might be. When you need the money is when your negotiating position is at its weakest. So when you have got plenty of liquidity, you've got plenty of equity just come through the door, then that's a good time to be having a conversation about what might happen further down the line. It's going to give you most options. You'll get the most flexible debt package and probably the cheapest debt package. And when it can start becoming useful is in a scenario like we talked about when you're just your equity round is taking longer than you thought to complete. Cash is getting tight. You've pulled all the levers you can, but the business is genuinely running out of money. If you've 12 months before signed a debt term sheet that says you can draw some debt down at that point, that can be super useful.
Yeah, again, it's something to look at just after you fundraised as well, just to get that facility in place, because then 18 months down the line when you're running out of money, you can draw down on it.
Yeah, and one very important thing to remember with debt is that it's the covenant structure. It's because these guys will covenant you, and you don't want to breach. Absolutely, you don't want to breach. So there is a case, and we have just spoken to, for example, Barclays about some debt for one of the companies that I'm just raised for, and they think high growth is 20% per annum, right? So 20% growth rate. And so if you can show 20% growth per year, then you're in their high growth portfolio and you're in their high growth scenarios. So we're kind of looking at 200% growth rates. And if I show them that model and I show them those financials, they're going to covenant me on 200% growth rates. So I don't want to do that because they only need 20, right? So I'm going to show them a totally different set of numbers that appeal to them, right? If I show them 80% growth, I'm still 4 times above what they need, right? And they're going to covenant me on 80%.
All right, we're gonna move on.
I was just going to back up something you were saying. By the way, I'll say 2 things. One, SVB does not always covenant, so on French debt doesn't. Point 2, I've actually genuinely received actually quite a number of cash flow forecasts before they came, and the name of the file, it's like cash flow forecast for bank. And you're like, okay, so it's probably another one out there. We do know.
That's great. This was actually that leads into my next question. It'd be great to hear from all you guys, but Thea was really interested to hear. I know you've seen a lot of pitches from early stage ventures on the incubator side, as well as moving into VC and private equity. What are the common mistakes, or what are some of the biggest mistakes you see when people founders come and pitch to you?
Oh God, that's such a good question. How long do we have? I think fundamentally, and this is less as part of the pitch and more about the mindset. A lot of times you have founding teams coming in and pitching and not really thinking about where the investor is coming from. So they haven't really thought about whether, they're not necessarily aware that if you really want to invest in a business, you're also selling yourself. And maybe this investment isn't right for you, or maybe the terms aren't going to be very good. People put themselves in positions where they immediately take some quite harsh, punitive terms. I know, sort of anecdotally, I was involved in a fundraise where there was a very attractive convertible loan put on the table by a very large investor that's effectively a family office, which is kind of the best kind of money you could ever get, you think. It ended up being a bit problematic because they didn't complete the paperwork. So the company was drawing down funds, the paperwork wasn't complete, and effectively they were beholden to, they couldn't go out and seek more funding until all of that was cleaned up. How could you present to another investor? How could you go and try and raise a Series A and then eventually a Series B? And at the time you think this is just an error, but it transpired a few years later. It discovered that actually this was kind of a common thing that this particular investor had done, and it put them in a place of immense control. And of course, a bit of trust, because you could have just absconded with a lot of money, but that wasn't likely to happen. So there's sort of a lot of different scenarios where I think people don't really think through get a little sort of giddy at the idea of, okay, I'm going to get some funding out of this person at this party, and don't necessarily think about the motivation of the person on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely due diligence you should do on your investors. You should be calling like people they've invested in before, asking them, people who they've invested in before who they've told you to call, and people who have failed, or who they haven't followed on with, or who've gone out of business, and ask them questions about like how active was that investor, like did they give you the money in time, how quick was closing, like how good were they on the board, how useful were they, and you know, asking those questions and getting someone on the phone that will give you a really good feel for whether this is someone you want to be working with for the next, it could be 10 years or so, or not.
One other point, just a very, very common one, is just putting a crazy valuation on the table. I know we touched on it before, but it immediately just, you know, you say, well, like the business, that numbers were crazy, pushed back a bit, didn't get any give, it's just off the table. And then if you're coming back 3 months later with a lower valuation, you look a bit silly.
Yeah, I think lending is pretty similar to, a bank or a lending credit committee is going to be similar to an investment committee at an equity fund. I think it's got a lot of the same principles, but some of the mistakes that I see made are just a fairly casual approach to sort of financials. Things like balance sheets that don't balance, P&Ls that don't seem to go anywhere and don't tally with the balance sheet, and just basically just making sure that your numbers add up is a fairly simple one. And having, if you're a SaaS business, and if you've got any of those in here, but if you're a SaaS business, just start, what you start doing early in the piece is going to be super important later on. So tracking the unit economics, all the kind of various SaaS KPIs that we all know are out there, just making sure that they are being tracked, because they are going to be really important when you come to have conversations with who's going to be put money into the company, whether it's equity or debt.
Yeah, I think one of the other big mistakes that, I help quite a lot of companies with their pitches and their decks, and you see the decks are just not aligned with what they're trying to say. They're out there pitching for X valuation, and the numbers don't add up to the story, and go and get someone, please, just get someone to sense check it, practice, because you're going to pitch for money. No one's going to give you money for free, right? It's not free money. You have to, achieve something to get that money. And so practice it and be aligned. Have your team run through the presentations and look at your deck. Does your deck make sense? Does it add up to that? Does it, like you talked about the balance sheets not adding up and the P&Ls not feeding into the balance sheets. Make sure that everything is actually working, because it's so easy for an analyst in a VC to look at your numbers and go, that doesn't add up. And then all of a sudden, your numbers, you're then, running around trying to find out what's the problem here, why doesn't it add up, what have I done wrong, all this kind of stuff. So just do all the sort of the basic stuff first and practice your pitch, practice the presentations with a friendly audience, with a hostile audience, and ideally go and pitch to VCs you don't want, because that is a great way to practice for the hard questions that the VCs you do want will ask you. 100% do that, and make sure you all know what you're going to say, and be aligned.
Yeah, it goes back to using the people that you know around the network. So, if you banked with SPB and you rang us up and said, I need to raise some money, I need to practice my pitch, can I just pop in for 5 minutes and do it? We're not going to say no, right? Just one quick one to add, just in terms of mistakes, just on pitching, we see a lot of pitch competitions, contests these days, 3-5 minute pitches, whatever they are. For me, personal one, it's a biggie and it happens a lot. If I don't know what the company does in the first sort of minute, I'm struggling. And there's a lot of companies out there that can't say that well enough, so just practice that.
I was going to say on the practice thing, that's it's a mistake I probably made in this round of funding, because I pitched to VCs before as raised 25 million last time around, right? So I thought I knew what I was doing, and I thought I knew, because I knew my old business, and I knew all of the questions that were going to come up and all the ways to deal with them. I was overly confident that I know all the questions that were going to come up with my own company, and I didn't, and I got a bit flummoxed quite a few times. So actually, the thing that saved me was when I had that list of who I wanted to invest, you reverse ordered them and got in contact with the people you least wanted first, and then do it the other way. So by the time you're pitching to the person who is completely in the right industry, completely in the right ballpark, and has the same sort of shared goals as you are, you practice it like 10, 15 times or so, and you know all those questions, you know the questions that are going to come up, and you've written down like, well, a response to, well, what happens if someone else tries to do this? What's your USP? All of the things that are going to come up every time.
I think that brings into the next question. After you pitch successfully because you're awesome, and you get this money from investors, what changes? What should companies expect once they finally do successfely raise money?
Sorry for talking.
Well, yeah, I want to start with Prakash or
So the first thing we do when we raise money is write the pitch deck for the next round. And I know that sounds weird, but I say it doesn't sound weird. But you write down exactly what the investors at the next round in 18, 24 months are going to want to see. So it's like, well, what do we need in terms of team? What do we need in terms of traction? What do we need in terms of like tech development to get to the place where we want to be in 24 or 18 months time? And that really helps you focus on, right, where do we need to make the hires? Where do we need to invest? And what sort of goals do we need to set ourselves to get to the stage where we're raising again in 18 months time?
Yeah, I think you should remember really that money is just a facilitator for the plan, right? And it's just the way to make the plan work. So you've got to have the plan. You've got to then, once you've got the money, you start executing. You should be executing before you get the money, to the extent that you can. And then when you get money, I mean, you know, you don't piss it all away at once on a massive party, but you know, or try not to. Yeah. But it is entirely about the execution, because that money, as we said before, and as Joe just said, there are KPIs attached to that money. It is a facilitator to achieve those KPIs that will lead you to the next round of funding. If you do not achieve and you do not execute, you will not get the next round of funding. And you know, there's many statistics on this. You know, 75 to 90% of companies that take seed don't get to Series A. You know, whatever it is, and like the number of the companies that get to Series A that get to Series B is a very sort of shallow or very steep fall off in terms of the number of companies that actually do make it. So start executing, understand the plan, and deliver on the KPIs the investors want to see, and beat those KPIs, because that's part of the point of actually executing and leaving some money out on the table further out into the time horizon, because then you can exceed those expectations because you haven't set them too high already. Right? Because if you fail, your valuation is going down, and then when your valuation is going down, though that may mean that you still get some money, but it ain't going to be what you actually want to achieve, 4 years from now or 5 years from now, if you don't actually execute properly on the terms that you've been given and the KPIs that you've been given today.
Once you've got the money in the business, you're going to have depending on what stage you're at, you can have a lot more pairs of eyes watching what you're doing, a lot more scrutiny. You might have more board members, whether they're actually on the board or whether they're board observers. If you've got a VC in there, they're likely to have a board seat, so you're going to have a lot more people that are asking you what you're doing and are going to want updates on a regular basis. I work with a lot of VCs. They're all sitting on multiple boards. Just in terms of sort of a bit of advice about how to manage this, there's not a VC out there who's going to be bothered by being over-communicated to by a portfolio company. What is going to bother them is if you do not keep in contact on a regular basis. And if things are sliding and they're not going the way you want them to go, they do want to know about that, and they do need to know about that, and they're much more likely to be helpful if you tell them early doors and you keep them updated throughout the piece, rather than just landing on them in a board meeting and going, oh, by the way, we've spent a load of cash on this and it hasn't worked.
On that, operationally, we went through a raise transaction really recently, and the sort of new level of organisation and structure. It's not that we weren't willing to be more transparent as a result of the fact that we were making progress and things had to be formalised. We just weren't currently doing the reporting. If you have a team of 30 people and the business is growing, the team isn't growing massively, everyone can get on a call at the same time. You just aren't necessarily in a position to immediately say, right, well, this is how the customer support's working, and here's some metrics and the performance of the platform recently, etc. and you just need to get into a position where you're ready to start tracking things that you probably weren't formally tracking just because it's not your priority.
I'd say the other thing is don't get overawed by your new investor and do everything they ask for. They will ask for a lot of stuff and you can push back against most of it. You know, if it's going to be wasting your time, if it's not something you track already, just have the confidence to push back. And I know that it can be quite difficult with especially new investors, big names. But if you do that at the beginning, it's far easier than doing it 6-9 months down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. For the CEOs that are in the room, you know, I've seen a lot of companies raise decent size Series A without actually having a CFO there at all. And so, you know, they've been kind of doing it themselves, or they've got a COO stroke CFO stroke, somebody that's doing, like, you know, chief of staff or whatever it is, who's doing everything in the background, but they're not going to be the right person to take it forward to the next step. But you know, just as additional levels of scrutiny come in, that's maybe one of the things you have to think about in terms of how you improve the team.
So you guys have talked a lot about picking the right investor and basically what to expect from the investor. What are the, in your personal experience, what have been the best investor relations? Like what were you expecting from those investors and what did they deliver on, so that people know what they can actually benefit from other than just receiving funding?
I think we talked a lot about money. It's not necessarily all about money, even with VCs. I mean, there's a lot of VCs that will tell you they can do a lot of value-add stuff, and a lot of them actually can. Just picking somebody that can bring more than just the money is quite important. So I've seen some stories where, you know, VCs stroke family offices, stroke corporate investors, and corporates are very good at this, have opened a load of doors for them from a sales point of view, either in the UK or globally or wherever it is. So actually having a think when you go to raise the money about, you know, how you can work with an investor that you know, everyone promises something. Generally, it's rare to meet a VC will just go, I'll give you the money then, and then you can get on with it. But just, you know, trying to, again, so I think you said, Joe, speak to people, you know, speak to their other investment companies, you know, figure out how have they delivered on what they said they would do over and above the money.
Yeah, I used to have quite a negative view of investors that they weren't much use, and then they. I think there's a few times that they've really added value. One time at Carwell, we nearly shut down one stream of one part of the business, and we got very close. The board sort of said, no, just keep going with it. You know, it's they've seen it, they've been there before, and now it's 20% of the company's revenue. And that was a decision that we as an executive team wanted to make, and the board, having had that experience, seen these things happen in other companies, were just like, hey, slow down, there's no need to do that yet, take a bit of time, and don't make a rash decision. So I think their experience across other companies can be useful. I think, you know, the network can be useful depending on which company you are. Like, oftentimes it isn't. If people want to talk to you, they'll talk to you whether you get an introduction or not. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think a lot of you guys that we were talking to before have quite early stage businesses, and I would be cautious, a little skeptical of the sort of incubator accelerator programs in general that promise to make a lot of introductions, because you can make all the introductions you want. If you want to get some kind of large contract with an enterprise level client, they may not be in a position to work with a small business. That may not be possible, especially if you're in a space of a lot of regulation. That may just be too difficult. So it's not necessarily worth taking on an investor just for the strategic angle if you're not 100% convinced that they can deliver on that.
I'd sort of echo that a little bit. I think the key thing to remember is that if your product or the problem that you're solving and the way you're solving that problem is a good one, people will be fighting to give you money. You'll have 2 or 3 term sheets and you may have the opportunity to choose. So, I mean, at seed level, at Series A level, at Series B level, it's a whole, you know, it's a different ballgame of what the investors can give you. And, you know, it's not necessarily the same thing that you want from each investor. The other thing I would say is as well, when you have that money on board and you're managing the investors, it's very important to keep the board meetings, the most formal opportunities, keep them very strategic. Make sure that the investors are informed beforehand with their monthly updates. however often they need to be informed. And if you're having quarterly board meetings or if you're having 6 weekly board meetings, do not turn them into some sort of boring historic analysis of what's happened over the last 3 months, and have a couple of slides on KPIs and all that stuff. They should already know that. Set up something like Tableau or something where they have a dashboard, and there's a dashboard for investors, so they can actually see it in real time whenever they want. Keep the board meetings and keep those formal meetings for something that's strategic. Ask them the questions. That's what they're there for. They're there to give you advice. They're there to advise the company. They're a participant in the equity stake in that company. So they should be actually, you should be sweating them in the same way that they're sweating you, working your backsides off. They need to work for their money as well, and give you the context, give you the strategic input that they're seeing across their other businesses. Maybe make those contacts that you need to actually take that business to the next level. Maybe looking at hiring the right staff, looking at key hires, chairman, chair people for the board, all of the things that you need for the business to take it onwards. Make those strategic elements, make them work for your money, right?
That's great. So I just have one more question, and then we're gonna switch over to Q&A. So you guys think about what you'd like to talk about. We've talked about the financials, and because we have people up here with a lot of finance background, what point do you need to start considering having finance support? And is it something where you do it on a project basis during fundraising? When do you need people to constantly be analyzing these things? Is it when you have an investor and you need to be pushing out reports and information? What would you say?
Very straightforward, right? Because you need to have, I don't say finance support, but you need to know what your business is doing, right? So you need to be analysing this stuff from day one. And your KPIs can change, but you need to know where you are at any stage in the business. When you say finance support, it's like hiring a CFO can be expensive, right? So if you're bootstrapping and you don't have any money, then you're doing that yourself, or you're getting buddies to do it, or you're getting a cheaper solution or something like that, or you're outsourcing it to one of the many firms of accountants out there. The time when you really need that support and that experience is really when you're going, I'd say 6 months before a key fundraise, because that's the time when you're building these financial forecasts. That's the time when you're and I've done it a few times. So for me, I go to different companies, and the process is generally, though these specifics are different, process is the same, and there are things that I've seen before that I can apply in those processes. It's dealing with the legal, seeing what the term sheets are, understanding where to push back. All of those things are very important, but from an analysis point of view and understanding those metrics, you need to have that from day one, because you need to know what your metrics are from day one, and you need to know how they will change and how you think they will change, because your investors are going to give you potentially different metrics. So you have to be ready to respond, and you have to be ready to push back on those as well. So do not be afraid to push back. But from a finance support perspective, get it as early as possible before you go into a big raise. If you're going to a seed and you're raising $500,000, you'll get finance support. And you may not need a lot of it, but you'll need some of it. If you're going into Series A, that's the stage definitely when you need to be thinking of having a CFO, because my main job now is to think strategically about where the business is in 2 years' time, or where the business is in 3 years' time. I don't really care about what's going on today in the business, because I know that's generally okay, because I thought about that last year, right?
Yeah, I think I'd echo all of that. Sometimes there's a business that's just so good that it survives in spite of not having a CFO, and I've worked with a couple, and when there's one in particular that comes to mind, and it was a business that wasn't based in the UK, and it was raising, I think, a Series C of about 40 million when we got involved with it. It had a CFO in name, but it wasn't really the experience that we got wasn't the kind of CFO experience you might expect. That business was going great guns, and it still is, and that business is, I think, a bit of an anomaly. Most businesses won't get that far if you have someone sort of that's doing the finance shit that hasn't got a full handle on all of these things that we've been talking about. So I think that there are plenty of people out there who will work on a kind of part-time basis. You don't necessarily need a full-time CFO. There are a lot of very good ones that I know that work with a lot of SVB companies People do sort of 1 or 2 days a week. They do 3 or 4 companies at a time, 2 or 3 companies. They are fantastic, and they're good at raising Series A, Series Bs. They're probably not brilliant at raising seed or Series F, but that's what they do. And so somebody that's relevant for the stage of the business can be like really additive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, finance people are great, right? It's hard to know what value someone with that experience can bring until you have them in your business. But it goes down to how you structure your business, how you manage. I mean, when I joined Carwell, we changed a couple of things, which meant our cash flow like completely changed from like I say completely changed by like 30 days. Doesn't sound that much, but like in terms of working capital, that's like £1 million less that you need to raise, right? And that's something that if you're not a finance expert, or you're not spending your whole day looking at the numbers and the cash flows and the profit and loss, you just wouldn't pick up. So there's a huge amount of value they can bring. As James said, there's some companies that can get by without it, and it's usually companies that are doing really well. So massive gross margins, like massive growth, and they can get by without having it. But if that's not you, then I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I would echo that. And at the moment, for instance, we've used for a long time now an analyst on loan from our main investor, and that works really well because he's a really, really senior guy. But if you could get that kind of person as a part-time CFO, that would be perfect. It's not a full-time role for us, but the business itself, financially and mechanically, is pretty simple, but it takes them a couple days a week, and that's a lot of work. I mean, using accountants would be extremely expensive, and we wouldn't get anywhere near the value we get out of that person, that sort of half headcount.
All right, shameless promotion for finance people. Thank you guys for all that and answering all my questions. Would like to open it up to everyone else. Any topic you want to throw out there for any individuals on the panel? Yep.
So I'm coming with kind of different angles. So I'm in the VC, and we're raising our second fund. So we're looking to raise from alphas. I wondered if any of you have any tips on what that's doing.
I was going to say, right, okay, fine. I guess LPs are similar to VCs in that there are certain classes of LP who would invest in certain types of fund. So I guess piece of advice number one, just make sure you go talk to LPs and spend your time with LPs who are going to be relevant to your business. There's plenty of conferences where LPs are in abundance, and so spending time with those. I'm not suggesting you spend all your money flying around the world, because you could do. But there's some quite good ones that I can connect you with later, which are kind of useful events. And just having a clear proposition, an investment thesis for a VC fund is not as in a deck, is not wildly different to a deck for a startup, as in you're trying to persuade somebody to put money into something that has got risk. And so you need it to be clear, concise, the parameters need to be tight, and it just need, just make it look, I'm sure you do, but I mean, everything needs to appear that everything is nailed down. It's absolutely, certain, but an opportunity not to be missed. But yeah, let me know later. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's placement agent. So it's worth having a placement agent.
What else?
Guys, I think some of you mentioned the topic of valuation, and I know it could be a very broad topic, but especially at the very early stage, could you just share your experience how you approached valuation for your businesses at the especially seed stage?
I'd love to give you a good answer to this, but it's really difficult. It's all guesswork, really. Every time I value a company, it's very much. You can go and look at benchmarks. You can go and look at what other people have raised and at what valuation, but really it's pure guesswork. It usually goes around. You raise about 20 to 25%, and of your company. So whatever you're raising, times it by 4 or 5, and that's pretty much where you'll end up at.
Can I say what not to do? And we see this a lot. don't say, well, we're a SaaS company, you know, a very early stage one, and therefore we command the kind of multiples that, you know, enterprise SaaS companies in the US are getting, because you're not the same thing. So you've got to be realistic about, you know, what you're comparing yourself to and where you're setting your benchmarks.
I'd agree with that definitely, because depending on the stage of your company, you're saying you're early stage.
Yeah.
Now, this comes back to the conversation we had very early on about who to go and talk to. Go and talk to the wrong people first, and they'll push back on your valuation if it's too high. You know, if the wrong people are clamoring to invest, then you can probably push it up when you don't speak to the right people. If the wrong people are saying like this is way too high, this is ridiculous, you know, you're kind of like you're getting a message. So you don't even want them to invest, right? So if they're pushing back on you, you've got to be listening to what your feedback is getting from the people that you don't want to invest, right? If they're all jumping over themselves, then you're probably too low, right? And unfortunately, I mean, Joe's right, there is no easy answer to this, because every business is very different, especially at that early stage, because we haven't, you know, no one really has any idea what it's going to look like in a year's time, 2 years' time, right?
Thank you.
I guess the other thing to put on the evaluation, if you're looking late, sorry, I know you asked early stage, later stages, we said we'd let the market decide. So we effectively, after series, or anything over series B, I think we went and said, look, there's no valuation, we're going to get term sheets in and see what people offer.
When a business gets funding, what's the biggest thing that they should do not to mess up that money? Or they just waste the biggest thing?
Hire the right people. Don't be too cheap about it. That's very expensive in the long run.
That was your high finance people. So people don't have that. Understand what that money is for, right? So I repeat this over and over. It's like a mantra for me, right? So it's like you're given that money for a reason to execute a plan. Yeah. Now, understanding what you need to execute that plan is actually crucial. And you know, look at the KPIs you've been given, right? You know, to mess up takes a lack of effort. Yeah. If you're not putting the time and the effort in, the chances are you're gonna screw it up somewhere, right? So you know, just be conscious of why you've been given that money, right? And address the points that lead you to the KPIs that people want to see, right? You've got to execute. Once you've been given the money, the only thing you have to think about is, as long as you've got 18 months or 2 years to do what you're supposed to do, what you pitched for, go and do it, right? You know, this is not rocket science.
I'd say psychologically it's quite easy to think you've made it. You know, you've raised probably a huge amount of money, you want to celebrate, and you think you can sit back and just sort of like hire some people, maybe not put effort in, go on holiday for a little bit. Like that's obviously exactly the wrong thing. It's a very easy thing to do. It's very easy to think, oh well, it's 2 years off, I need to worry about, I've had this really intense period, it's time to back off, whereas actually the opposite is true. So like that's a mistake that I think has happened probably every time I've raised money, is that there's definitely been that lull period afterwards where things slow down a little bit, where people with stupid suggestions, everyone who's had an idea for how to grow the company comes to you as FD after you raise money. They're like, oh well, you've got all this money, let's buy let's launch in Romania or something like that, or let's I've got this pet project that I've been waiting to get out there, and it's very easy to say yes because you've got all that money, and that's exactly the time that you have to, as Prakash said, be really clear about, no, these are the exact things that we need to do for the next level. We're not gonna accept any of these suggestions.
Yeah, country expansion was going to be mine. So I mean, working with scale-ups, one of the most common things that doesn't go quite so well is country expansion. And there's a million reasons why that might be the case. Normally it's a combination of things. But I've worked with companies, or not quite worked with companies, who have spent pretty much an entire equity round on scaling their business into geographies that they didn't know enough about, that they hadn't researched properly, and they spent a ton of money for pretty much the entire round, and then just ended up nothing, scale back out of boredom and back in the home market. What do we do now? And that's that's not a good place from which to raise another round of equity. So just being aware of the markets that you're trying to go into, because it is not easy, and especially the States where salespeople are hugely expensive, and there's a long lag before you'll get any success.
Yeah, and I think that's completely it, because you've had so much success after that. But I mean, to get to that fundraising point, you've obviously done a load of things really well. You believe you've drunk your own Kool-Aid. You believe everything you're going to do is going to come up trumps, and then you launch in. I mean, Carwell, we launched in Germany, and that took like a year and a half to pick up. And our plan, we had it, in 3 months it would be up and running. We just underestimated our ability to understand the market, to execute, and to launch in a different country. And everyone does it, I guess. Well, not everyone. Maybe some people get it right, but it's a really easy mistake to make.
When you said about Carwell in 18 months, how did that affect your marketing plan?
So it wasn't too bad, because we were working to. I mean, it cost a bit more than it was meant to, but it wasn't. It's not. We weren't spending a huge amount of money on it, because we knew what our CPAs were, right? So we knew that if we could get people in for probably about exactly what we make from them, then that's where we wanted to run the business, and that's when we wanted to expand. So we didn't push our marketing up until the point that we could get our customer acquisition costs low enough down to really grow it. And that was the problem. We were hitting sort of 40, 50 sales a month at really high customer acquisition costs. And it was only when we really focused on what made the UK work well, like focus on one area, one geography, one brand of car, get that to work at a decent CPA and start scaling it out, did we start to see the returns from it. So it didn't cost us that much, given we raised a huge amount, like 25 million or so, but it did cost us like far more than we thought it would.
The other thing I would say is, like, when you've done a Series A and you've raised X million dollars or pounds or whatever it is, or you've done a seed and you've done that, and it doesn't work, change. Yeah? Do not be afraid to pivot. Do not be afraid and communicate that. I used the example of traffic. We raised a Series A. We were a consumer-based app. We were acquiring users. We had a big marketing budget. We were churning. We had like 40-50% retention rate, which is amazing, which is unheard of. But what's the point of a user? Yeah, no one had actually asked that question properly. The users we were acquiring, what was the point of them? They were just there to acquire users. So we were supposed to be a million users, 10 million users, 20 million users. We're churning away 50% of our marketing budget, trying to acquire these budget. So we need 300 million to actually get to a level where we wanted to be. And so we pivoted. We changed our business model. And now we've raised the most recent money that we've raised is basically as a tech platform that enables other people to launch their businesses, because we don't have the capital to put the assets into the business. So it's a multimodal transport app. So we don't have the ability to like have cars like Uber does on the streets, but we have the ability to be a platform to enable other people to do that. So for example, if Volkswagen can do it, wants to put 10,000 cars onto the streets of Berlin, they can do that. They can use us to do that. So when you get it wrong, and there are multiple things, do not keep trying to push to achieve targets that you're not going to. If you're miles away, change your business model, because you still have money left to try and be successful and pivot away from what's screwing up. Yeah.
I mean, my experience is the opposite. Is that we we wanted to change, and not changing was better for the company. So it's sorry to bring a bit of discord to the panel.
It happens, right? We have to.
Really interested to hear that, just at the point at which you've got what you're seeking and you've got funding and things coming on, the risk that the term sheets around everything with the covenants are kind of confusing, because that power asymmetry is so strong. Is there help available at that point? And where do you go if you need that help?
I mean, speak from an SVB point of view, I mean, we would have, if you'd asked us to, sat there and walk you through the term sheets, but something you didn't ask. So they can be quite confusing. And so they're full of weird terminology. We're an American bank, so ours are slightly Americanized as well, which makes it even worse. So first step I'd say is, to the point you made earlier, you've got to understand what it is that's in front of you. So, and if by the point that you've read it and then got the person who put it in front of you to come out and explain it, and you still don't understand it, you've probably got an issue. So I don't know who you then go and talk to try and make that clear. Maybe it's a lawyer or something. But I mean, there are people that you can go and talk to. But I think that the best deals are generally the clearest deals. You've got to have full clarity in your head of what you're signing up to, because otherwise you're never going to know whether it's the right thing for you to be doing, whether it's going to work for your business when you need it. If it's debt, will it give you what you want at the right time, at the right price, with with covenants that work. Covenants themselves can be quite dangerous for an early stage company. So if you are going to put one on the business, then just understanding exactly what it's doing and what will happen if you don't hit it, and different people give you different answers to that. That's going to be key, like really key as well.
I think this goes a bit beyond fundraising and beyond money and beyond all that, because it becomes about ego, right? And it's like, I've got this term sheet in front of me. I should know what I'm talking about. I should know. Yeah, I'm an intelligent. You're an intelligent guy, I'm sure.
The lenders will play on that.
Sorry?
The lenders will play on that, right?
Right,
So
well,
if you know
of
everything
course.
about your business, that doesn't mean
Well, I
you
agree.
know about maintenance.
Absolutely, and the point is that we have networks for exactly this. You should be in a network of people. Whether you're part of this network in this room, or whether you're a part of some other network somewhere else, you have to have people there that you can actually fall back on and ask. And then it becomes entirely about your own ego. Do I believe I'm clever enough to understand this by myself with a dictionary? Understanding legal terms that are convoluted, and they are convoluted, and they're convoluted for deliberately, really to cover, whether it's a debt round or an equity round. They're not there to help you. It's to cover their asses if something goes wrong, and to screw you and to be able to sue you in the UK or US courts, No one's going to want to screw. No one's going to want to sue you in Romania, right? They're going to want to sue you in the UK. They want to sue you in the US just to cover their own asses, So you need to have a network of people and be almost humble enough to actually be able to say, look, I don't understand this, and rather than, if you don't need to go to the bankers or you don't want to go to the VC and expose yourself, have a network of people that you can actually go to that you trust.
And your board is probably quite a good starting point, especially it does actually.
Yeah, I think ideally you have an idea of what you're going to see before you get given your first term sheet, because that's a dangerous position to be in, because you might be desperate for the money and you feel like you've got no negotiating power anyway, and you don't know what any of these terms are, and you don't know, if double dipping is normal in this country, is it, or whatever, you've got no idea there's a lot of research you can do ahead of time before you get to that point, I think. That's ideal. But Prakash, I think you mentioned it before, have a good lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a crucial part.
We've got time for one or two more. So.
I'd be really interested to know if you've successfully raised more than you knew that you needed, and what an appropriate buffer might be palatable to investors.
Yeah, we at Carlisle we raised far more than we needed. That was because the last investors were retrieving, they had a minimum check size, so we had to get some of the early investors to sell out to get them to the amount that they wanted to put in. I think that's a good thing. The UK automotive market's gone pretty terribly recently, and we'll give them a far bigger amount of buffer than if we raised the amount we wanted to. So it's actually gone pretty well.
Yeah, I would just say always raise more than you need. Always. It's like you present your forecasts and you present your models and etc. You want to be out there having growth numbers that are aggressive, achievable, but that should be more than you need to actually achieve. And you always want to have that buffer. You always want to have it just in case things go wrong, and you communicate that to your investors. And even if you're running out of cash and you have no chance of getting any more, at least you have 6 months or 9 months of knowledge before that actually happens, and that's what the buffer's there for when things go wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. Always, you always raise far more than you need.
I just want to give like a rule of thumb in terms of time, maybe from 16 to 24 months.
that is the key, right? It's always going to take you longer to raise money than you think. So you always want to think ahead, and you're like, if I'm going in 18 months, I'm going in 12. If I need the money in 18, I'm going in 12. Because it's going to take. If you think it's going to be a 2-month cycle at 8, it's going to be 6. If you're going to need the money in 18 months, then you want to have 24 months. That's just natural, because inevitably, the more investors or the whoever the lead is, if it's a new lead investor, the legal wrangling around term sheets, around the shareholder agreements and the articles and all of this stuff has to be redone, and there's the previous investors will stick their bloody laws in, and it'll just get into a mess, and will always take more. So give yourself a buffer of, I don't know, 6 months extra, right?
So we have time for one more question if there is one.
I guess we're at the very, very start of this evening, then we talked about you don't do this very often, so you want to do it right the first time you do it. And going to things like this is really useful, but then where else can we find more information so that the first time that we do it, or the next first time that we do this, we're doing it well?
So the question was just, where else could you go to get the kind of levels of support, events like this, and how else can you get the knowledge? There's a lot of people around who are happy to talk and share experiences. I think that there's a lot of events. You can make yourself very busy going to events, and events like this where you get a good mix of conversation that's about a specific subject tends to be quite useful. You could spend all your time at conferences watching people on stages, and it wouldn't be that valid. 90% of the content, if that, is going to be not relevant to what you need. So I guess it just there's plenty of places you can find lists and diaries of events going on around London that you can kind of just try and pick out the best ones in there, and just use your network to find how you do it.
You can find really willing, able, and really helpful people who do mentoring, and that's a great way, and someone who can have a one-on-one conversation, because there are lots of great events, but it can also be a little bit of a circle jerk, and also not always the best use of actually your time. Apologies, sorry, I've shocked James.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one-on-one sort of is where you can ask the stupid questions that maybe you don't want to ask. You can ask the 5 or 6 questions you want to ask. And the way I did it the first few times is I just reached out to people, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on the startups group. When I was at Carwell, there was like a Balderton CFO sort of emailing group. So I just went and met a load of people who'd done it before and asked them loads of questions. And I think that's the best way to do it. And especially when you get a term sheet, go and take it to someone you know and trust and get them to read through it.
I'd say that there's absolutely no 100% guarantee of doing it well at all. Because every time I've done it, there's been other things that have come up that have just flummoxed me every time. And it's a different thing every time, because the things that I know that I'm going to be okay at, they're always okay, right? It's obviously the things that come out of left field that you just what the why? And those things will always happen. And at that point, as everyone said, you have a network. You have people that you can fall back on, and you can ask the dumb question. It's like, and that's more important. And if you're going to VCs, the first thing you do, or if you have a VC investor or you have a seed network kind of investor, then you should be able to get into their sort of like round robins or their email groups. And I know like Bolton have them, Octopus have them. All of the VCs have these networks, and they are priceless. Absolutely invaluable, because you can go to people who have done it before and ask them, like you said, the really, really dumb question, and they won't think you're an idiot because it's happened to them.
That's great. I think that's a really good one to end on, and tying back to the goal of this discussion. And I really like the closing points that everything is always going to be trial and error, because there's always going to be different things about it. And I guess what's important is talking to people that have been there on those specific things, and trying to learn what we can. And that comes with valuation, with pitching, with with your company in general when you may need to pivot, just putting it in front of people and learning from those mistakes and experiences, I guess. Well, with that, our panelists are also going to be here, some of them, after we close up here. So if you do have any questions or want to talk to them afterwards, rush the stage. I do want to thank you guys again for coming out tonight. I especially want to thank you guys for being here and sharing your experience and knowledge with everyone. It's very, very helpful. Thank you. So with that, we'll wrap up. And there is a bar here for cash purchases for the next hour or so if you guys want to stick around and talk to each other.